And so I always felt like I was playing this split-second game of, are we going to be friends, when I would meet a new person? Because it was like, I can lie to you now and tell you I have no kids and rip away a little piece of my soul right now, but save you the emotional drama of going into that. Or I can have that heavy conversation now if I think we're going to, be acquaintances long term, because at some point it's going to come up.
Hello, and welcome to Grief, Gratitude, and the Gray in Between podcast. This podcast is about exploring the grief that occurs at different times in our lives, in which we have had major changes and transitions that literally shake us to the core and make us experience grief. I created this podcast for people to feel a little less hopeless and alone in their own grief process as they hear the stories of others who have had similar journeys. I'm Kendra Rinaldi, your host. Now, let's dive right into today's episode. Welcome to today's episode. I am excited to introduce you all to my new friend. And I say new because we've never met. This is my Instagram friend / now friend, Crystal Webster, who's on the line. And I just love the benefits of social media because they do end up opening these opportunities of getting to know people that you have so many commonalities with that you would have otherwise not known had you not exposed exposed. That did not sound right. Did that sound right? Oh, Crystal, I just said exposed.
I love it. We're getting this off to a good start already.
You know what I mean. When we really show our true selves and we kind of share about us, we get to meet people that share certain, similarities. And I love that you reached out to me, and now here we are on the podcast. Yay! So excited. So, Crystal, tell us a little bit about you. Where do you live right now? Where
So
are
I'm
you
in
living?
Kansas City.
And this was my questions. And again, because I was Kansas City, Kansas, or Kansas City, Missouri, Kansas City. Which one? Across
Technically
the bridge. Hello.
both. Yeah. There's a Kansas City, Kansas, and a Kansas City, Missouri. I'm actually in a suburb on the Kansas side.
Okay. Is it always? Do you always get that question anytime when you
Most
say
of the
you're from
time,
Kansas
yeah.
City? Yeah. It's interesting because when my husband traveled too, like he loves it, by the way. He says it's a gorgeous city. Kansas City.
I love it.
Yeah, good. Awesome. Yeah, he says it's beautiful. But I was like, I'm always like, Missouri, Kansas, which one? Like, it's just so misleading with the word Kansas in the name of the city, but yet that sometimes it's Missouri. So anyhow, it's just, and do you say Missouri or Missouri? What's the proper way? Do you know?
The Missourians call it Missouri.
Missouri, right? The
Yeah,
southern side sounds like Missouri.
but in
Missouri.
Kansas City, we call it Missouri.
Missouri.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
It's a
So,
local
Crystal,
dialect.
it's a yeah. So you'll know who's from Kansas. You know who's from Kansas if they say Missouri, or the one, and you'll know who's from Missouri if they say Missouri.
Pretty
Yeah.
much. Yeah.
All right. To anybody that's from Missouri, I'm sorry if we're just trying to just get it right. Whatever.
Yeah.
Tomato, it's still the same thing. So, So I like to keep these conversations very casual and flowy, as you could see, Crystal, even though the topic we're going to talk about is not necessarily light and fluffy, right?
Yeah.
Let's just talk a little bit about that. So you live in Kansas City, you are married. Tell me a little bit about your life and your husband and what it is you do.
That's a loaded question if I've ever
Loaded.
heard
Oh,
one.
okay. How about? Ooh, okay. So that's too much for first date here. Sorry, let me just backtrack. So yeah, how long have you known your husband?
Oh, okay. So it's kind of a funny story. We met in high school. We went to high school together, and we actually dated for a few months as ninth graders, as freshmen.
Really? Oh my gosh, you've known each other
Yes.
since, oh, how
Forever.
cute.
Our friendship and relationship is old enough to drink at this point, which makes me feel really old. But we only dated for a couple months, and then I dumped him because he was kind of a band nerd.
Oh,
Um,
my kids are band nerds.
I mean,
Excuse me, can you
I was a
please reach What were you? He was a band nerd, what were you?
I was a theater choir nerd.
Oh, yes, like
So
myself.
yeah, I was
You were the other type of nerd. You
right.
were the
Yes,
theater nerd, he was a band nerd.
exactly.
Okay.
Our nerdiness just didn't mesh very well. Um,
I
and
love
then we
that.
didn't talk for 5 years,
Oh, wow.
and
So ninth
came
grade, and then did you go to the same so this is the you were in the same high school, but in ninth grade you dated, you didn't talk even though you were in the same high school at that time? Were you in the
yeah. I
same?
mean, because
Okay.
our circles really didn't revolve around. I mean, he was in the
Mm,
band and I was in the theater, and we kind of had some mutual friends, but not our circles really didn't overlap. And then we
mhm.
went to different colleges. Um,
Out
and
of
then
state? Is
no, they were both in state,
okay.
but probably a couple hours from each other. He went to K State, and I went to a little bitty school, Emporia State. Um, and then it was one of those, you kind of come back for, I don't know, Christmas break or
Holidays,
Thanksgiving
uh-huh.
break or whatever. And you're like, oh, I'm back in town, but I don't really want to hang out with my parents. So call everyone I know to see if they're in town. And then they call everyone they know. And pretty soon you have, 50
A
people.
party.
Yeah,
You have a party.
you have a party. And it's been a whirlwind ever since that time.
Wow. So this was like so 5 years after in one of these times in which you came, that's when you guys met in one of these 50 something people that were in
Yeah.
town from having been. That's amazing. That's
And
awesome.
our second first date, we have first firsts and second
Yeah.
firsts,
Okay. The
because the
first
first
was
time
in ninth grade.
it was in ninth grade, and our
Okay.
second first date was 01, 02, 03.
Okay. Wait. Oh, 1 or 2.
So
What?
January 2nd,
Oh,
2003.
10203. I was like, what? Oh,
What does
I
that
thought you
mean?
said like a one, a two, a three. I'm like, a
Oh,
one, a two, and a three. What is a
what?
one and a
No,
oh one? Oh, January 2nd,
second.
2003. Oh, and then when was the
Yeah.
marriage then? That was the date. When was the marriage?
Uh, 3.5 years later. So we got
Oh,
married in 2006. So we actually
mhm.
got engaged a year before that in 2005 on a vacation to Las Vegas.
Okay. Did you
Um,
get married in Vegas too?
a year later, we went back and got married in Vegas.
If you get engaged in Vegas, you get married in Vegas.
I
That should
think
be
you do,
the other
yeah.
slogan. That's the other little slogan. What happens in Vegas stays in Vegas. If you get engaged in
Yep.
Vegas, you
You
get
come
married.
back and get married in
You could
Vegas.
get yeah, you come okay, and so
But
you've been married
I feel
since
like it's
yeah.
very important to say that they were two different trips a year
Yeah,
apart.
yeah, yes, thank you. Thank you for my husband and
I'm
I, we dated for like
crazy
8
and
months, but we dated for like 8 months between like dating and getting married. So I have it's no problem for me to for you if you would have told me we got engaged in that same day we got married, I would have not seen anything weird with
yeah,
that. But for you, so you guys got engaged and then came back.
came
And
back.
then so the story we're going to share a little bit is then of parenting and kind of the journey there. So at what point down in your relationship did you guys start planning to have children or wanting to have children in your life?
So we always kind of knew that we wanted children.
Mhm.
And I don't know if that was so much a we knew or society told us that we knew.
Mm, mhm,
I'm from the Midwest, and you you go to college and you get married and you buy a house with a picket fence, and you have kids, and then you get old and then you die. Like that's how it
mhm,
works. Um, so we always kind of knew that kids were in our future, and not necessarily. I don't say that with any connotation to that. Like it wasn't forced upon me, but I don't ever remember being like, oh my gosh, the only thing I want to do in life is be a mother, if that
yeah,
makes
which some
sense.
people yeah, oh, it makes a total sense, yeah, because
Um,
some people that just know and that's already like they're it's kind of like somebody being a doctor or wanting, kind of having
yeah,
that goal. It's the same, like motherhood being like that kind of idea of who they see they are going to be, aside from anything else. And so it just, you just kind of just knew you were, but that was not necessary. So then 2000, okay, 2005, wait, 2006 is when you got
Hmm.
married.
And it wasn't
Um,
like a hurry up and get married so we can start having kids, or
right.
it was just we're going to get married and then be married for a while and then kind of go on, kind of
See what happened.
go
Yeah.
see what
On
happens
that
kind of thing.
journey of marriage, of this new chapter, and then just go from there. So
Yeah.
there was no particular timeline. It was not like the clock is ticking type of feeling ever
Mm-mm.
in your relationship. Okay.
And again, I'm
So
a good Midwestern girl, so I got married at like 20. Well, if I tell you, then you can do math and figure out how old I
oh,
am today. I don't know how I
oh,
feel
it
about that.
doesn't matter. But do you have a I am I'm totally like good with age. I
Yeah.
tell people all the time, I'll be 45 this year. I'm like,
Yeah,
I'm
I
fine with
definitely get better with age, I like to think.
there we go.
So I mean, I got
Like the
married
good
at
old tease.
24.
You got married at 24? Yeah,
At
you were young.
24. I mean,
Mhm,
which is young. I mean,
mhm.
that's the appropriate Midwestern age, I feel like.
Interesting. That's interesting. So there are a lot of boxes you gotta kinda fit into that
Oh yeah.
mentality, the age and the everything.
I mean, and it's
So
never like I felt obligated or forced into it, but that's just kind of how things work here. You just
hmm,
kind of you graduate college and you hopefully find your spouse or partner in
mhm,
college, and then after that you do, you move on and check the next box and check the next box kind of
hmm.
thing.
Now with that, was there also like a box then, like in the Midwestern mentality that you kind of grew up with, is there something about like what happens once some of these when families or women you start having then children, do they like does career go on the side burner, or does that go simultaneous with then motherhood?
It really depends on the family and the mother. um,
Mm,
some people want to take on motherhood full time, and others
mm,
want to have another
both.
outlet. Yeah, have both.
Okay, so it's not
um,
like not one thing is not expected. It's not like, yeah, in certain cultures or areas in the United
right.
States or anywhere else in the world in which once you become a mom, that's it. You everything else you forget about whatever you studied or anything. You just kind
Right.
of, this is the new rule. That's not necessarily the case there.
No.
So then how then tell us a little bit then what happened, because this is, by the way, to the listeners, this is going to be a very moving story. Crystal and I try not to talk to people too much before an interview, but since we had not actually met in person, we did have a Zoom conversation, which, wow, we could not hang up on that one, could we?
No,
We
we
had.
couldn't.
We talked and we just had a great time getting to know each other. And so,
Yeah, we're best friends now.
yeah,
I've
now
never met
we're
you in real life, but we're best friends.
now we know everything. Yeah. Now we know we have theater in common. We have all these other things. So, so anyway, so just so you know, it's one of those tear jerker kind of heart strings pulling kind of story that we're going to share. So just thought I'd give that little piece there, because it is gonna, even though we're joking and talking in this way, it will take a turn. So just kind of giving you all a heads up. So, so yeah, so tell us then a little bit then, sorry, now that I'm talking to now I'm back to you, not the audience and that's
Okay.
on this page, not my soliloquy thing. Um, so yeah, tell us then, so 24, you got married, had you started to work at that time? Because you were out of college.
Mhm.
So what was your career and stuff then?
Yeah, so I had gone to college to be a tax accountant,
Mm-hmm.
and I went to work at one of the big four tax accounting firms as a tax person. So I did
Wow,
tax returns.
this is from, like, you being the artsy, the theater, girl, in high
Yes.
school, and then you go into numbers. Were you good at math in high school too?
Um, in accounting, you really only need to know how to add and subtract. So I can handle adding and
Okay.
subtracting. Anything more than that,
So was
no.
no, that's it. I wouldn't,
Calculus
it's
and
just one of
geometry, I'm
those
out.
things. Yeah, no, but it's interesting. Like, it's one of those things that I don't know, I would never think of, like, going to something like that with, numbers first per se, for me, the type of personality that I was, but,
Oh yeah.
or am, or was. That's awesome. Okay, so then you did that, and then, you were already working, and then your husband and what's
Mhm.
your husband's name? Sorry, just
Kyle. Yeah,
Kyle.
Kyle.
So, Kyle, what was from band, nerd as Kyle, this is no offense to you,
Yes.
by the way, when you listen to this. This is not
Lovingly
about you.
referred to,
Lovingly.
right.
Yeah, my kids are in band as well, as I say. So, tell what is his line of work?
So he works in reinsurance, which is basically he works for a company that insures insurance companies. I didn't
Oh,
know that
wow.
was a thing.
There was yeah, we
Apparently it
learned
is.
something new. We learned that the
Yeah.
people that are passionate about theater end up going into accounting, and we know that people that go into band can be work into the insurance,
Yep.
field. So and so this is like 25, 26. What, you
Mhm.
guys are married, you went back to live in the same town you guys grew up? Tell us a little bit about that.
So we actually I moved to the city because I'm in a suburb
Big
of
girl, big
Kansas City.
girl.
I know. I moved to the city, which is literally, I mean, it's 20
5
minutes from my
minutes.
house. Yeah. It's not like it's that far away. But yeah, so I moved to the big city and got a big girl job, um, and then his company uh, gave him an overseas assignment. And so we moved to
Wow.
Zurich, Switzerland for 2 years.
Wow. Okay. So how was that? Okay. So even though we're going to talk about grief in another area, how was that? That's huge. Two
It
years
was
in a
huge.
country in which different language,
Yep.
different culture. How was that experience for you?
Um, it really set me up. First of all, it was amazing and I loved it.
Hmm.
And I never want to do it again. The thing that I really enjoyed was I pretty much went, I mean, I think there's an 8 or 9 hour time difference. So I went to the other side of the world for the most part.
Hmm.
Um, and I saw just how different and how similar people are. Um, my favorite thing to do was to go to the grocery store just to kind of be around people in their element because nobody's like
Mm.
on,
Is that what you do when you're on vacation? Yeah, those are not the
yeah,
kind of things you do on vacation. Yes, you're right.
but it's my favorite thing to like even now when
Ah,
I go on vacation. Um, my first stop is the grocery store
that's awesome.
just to,
That's a good pointer for anybody that travels, and
yeah.
that's the best way to get to know. What was so you would people watch?
Oh, I people watch, and people there are people that are from Switzerland pretty much are from Switzerland. They're born in Switzerland, they live in Switzerland, they die in Switzerland.
Mhm.
Um, and there are a lot of expats, so they're very closed off from basically from getting their heart broken. So they're not real
Mm.
easily they're not real open to making a whole bunch of really close new friends. Um,
Mm.
which I thought was kind of interesting. So a lot of my friends were, well, and also it didn't help that I didn't speak the language very well.
Mhm.
English is kind of the lowest common denominator. Like you can speak 8 languages and English, and so everybody wants, everyone can speak English. There would be many nights that we'd go to restaurants and the table next to us would be speaking in French, and the waiter would be, you know, speaking Swiss German, and they'd talk to each other in
Mm.
English because they both knew that language.
Oh, wow. So that
Um,
was a common denominator of wow.
yeah.
Okay. So language-wise, that was not the issue. You could technically maybe find somebody that you could speak, but it was the fact that people that live there, because that is where, and this can happen in small towns too, even here in the
Oh
United
yeah.
States, I've
Anywhere.
noticed that. Yeah, in which where people is that where if that's where they were born, if that's where they grew up, then they don't need to expand their circle of friends because they've had the same circle of friends all their life. There's no need for that sometimes. So who would you then relate to? Who were your friends? The expats that lived there, like so
Yeah.
U.S. people that lived there. Okay, and were
Um,
they there for the same line of work as your husband, or other type of jobs?
there's definitely an expat community, and if you ever go overseas to do something like that, I highly recommend you find that group of
Mhm.
people. A lot of them did happen to work with my husband's company. Several of them didn't.
Mhm.
Actually, a few of them came over with my company when I actually left my job when we moved to Switzerland. But there were a couple people that from Kansas City that moved to Zurich about the same time, which I thought was crazy.
Oh,
And I was like,
wow.
"Hey, I know you from Kansas City."
That is so weird. Yeah, what a
Yeah.
small world, right? As I say.
Yes.
That right. And now how was that for you then for a couple of years then of not having then your job a job, the
Yeah.
job, and then you're here in another country and then you're there because of what your um husband, is doing.
Mhm.
So then what were some of the ways that you would what would you do? What would you
Yeah.
do with your time?
So my job was to play tour guide and travel agent, for the most part. So when we take trips and living in Zurich, it's like 3 hours to anywhere you want to go. You want to go up to the mountains, it's 3 hours by train. You want to go to Moscow, it's 3 hours by plane. You can take the train, to wherever you want to go, pretty much hop on some form of transportation and you're there in 3 hours. So we did a lot of traveling, and that's kind of where
Mm.
we chose to focus because we knew that this was kind of a once in a lifetime opportunity.
Yes. And that's so good that you actually took that opportunity to be able to learn so much about all these other cultures by traveling and stuff too, because you knew it was once in a lifetime. Because a lot of times we can still end up wanting to stay in that little bubble, right? And
Hmm.
then we don't end up expanding. So you just, use those 2 years to really expand,
Yeah,
grow that opportunity. So then when you guys came back, was that culture shock for you when you came back to the United States after being 2 years abroad? Did you notice a difference in even, having left your
oh
town and
yeah,
then coming back, like, did it feel like this is something that I at least have experienced at time, as if time stood still where like as if things kind of stayed where they were when you left? Did you notice that feeling?
yeah. One thing I really noticed that was probably the biggest like culture shock piece to me was that I constantly was in information overload because I could
Mhm.
understand all of the conversations and things around me. Like I could hear the lady at the table next to me, hear her talking up to her daughter about whatever, the math test or whatever. And I could
Mm.
hear and understand the TV and the radio and things like that, where I had just kind of learned or taught myself, I guess, to tune that stuff out because I couldn't understand it anyway,
That
for the
is
most part.
so wow, that I had never thought of that because 'cause I've never lived in a place in which I don't even though I moved here from Colombia, I knew English all my life. So that's never happened to me, that what you're just
Yeah.
describing, and that was just I've never heard that, and it just makes so much sense. The fact that you had to be more with your thoughts than in other people's business
Hmm.
business when you were in Switzerland. Well, when you come back, you have
I
all
mean, and
this
it's
overload of
so,
information
yeah.
and sounds everywhere. Yeah.
I mean, and who doesn't? Not that you're eavesdropping, but who doesn't
No,
hear
it just
the
happens. Right, right,
conversation next to you and
right,
perk your ear or whatever?
right,
Um,
right.
and it's not that I couldn't. I knew enough of the language to get around and do, like go to the grocery store and buy a cup of coffee and those kind of things. But I just wasn't fluent enough in Swiss German, which by the way is not a language that you can go up and pick up a textbook for.
Mm,
It's like yeah, it's a dialect more than anything, um, which is fascinating to me. But so I wasn't as comfortable with the conversation as I am with English. So I couldn't
mhm.
just, kind of hear it in the back of my head or whatever and follow along or anything. So I really went, that to me was probably the biggest culture shock coming back is, oh my gosh, I can hear everything and understand everything. And this is way too much. And just
Mm.
turn off the world.
Wow, that's interesting. Yeah, so do you feel you experienced more grief coming back than you did going? In terms of the change, or was it just different,
It
the
was
the
it was
grief
just
experience?
different. There
Mhm.
was grief. At first I was like, all right, this is a great vacation. And then it really
Mm.
settled in when I was over there. Like I don't really have a reason to get up in the morning if it's not
Mm.
to, clean the house and just do the things to fill my time. Um, and towards the end, my goal was to make sure that I got up and showered before my husband came home from work, and then I went to bed early enough that when he got up, that he didn't know that I had been up all night, which didn't work very
What?
well. He knew.
So you would actually so you would go to bed at the same time as he would? No, before he would?
I
Or
would go to
how
bed basically um, about the time the sun was rising to go. He would get up to go to work, and I'd be going to sleep. I turned into a vampire.
just because you could not sleep. Sleep was hard for you because of the stress and stuff too, to be able
Sleep was
to
hard, and plus the time
Mm.
difference is if I stayed up late enough, I could talk to my friends on the internet after they got home from work. And I didn't really have anything that I pressing to get up for in the morning.
Mhm.
And I've always been a night owl. Let's be 100% honest here.
That's the
Um,
honesty here.
yeah, I
So that
mean,
was not
I
too unlike you, but it was still like something that it was even more because of the time change, and also because you were probably just thirsting for those connections of the people that you had here. So if you staying up
exactly,
late could mean you could talk to them and connect with them, you were willing to kind of sacrifice some sleep in order
yeah,
to have those moments of connection.
exactly.
Um, okay, and so then when you guys got back then, that was around what year was that then?
It was
I'm
very
all about, like,
late.
years. Most
Oh
times
yeah.
people forget, like, years, but I don't know.
Oh
She
no.
gives me a
It
timeline in my
it
head.
it. I can pretty much give you dates for a lot of things.
Well, you just
It
told me
was
the 10
a 10203.
0203.
Yep. So we came back late 2009 is when we
Okay.
came back to the States, and we actually moved in with my in-laws. My husband Kyle's parents. We moved into their house
Mhm.
because we didn't have anywhere else to live.
You had just
Yeah.
gotten back. And then how long did you live with your in-laws?
We lived with them until we bought the house we live in now. Um, we bought it in April, so like 9 months later. Yeah,
Okay,
it
okay.
was it was pretty much 9 months later, um, because I found out I was pregnant on Halloween 2009,
Okay.
and I
And
woke up
that
my
was that a
husband.
surprise? Was that a surprise at that moment
Um,
when you guys found out, or
yes and no.
at that point had you guys already been trying?
Um, we had started the conversation
Okay.
of, hey, we've kind of sowed our wild oats. We moved across the world. Like,
Mhm.
now it's time to settle down and get serious.
Mhm. That
And
wait,
then it was,
let's check that other box now.
yeah, now it's time to check the
Yeah.
next box. We
Yeah,
checked
yeah,
this
the
one.
next one.
We're just doing our to-do list here.
Yeah. If you
Um,
haven't seen, have you ever Michelle Poler, have you ever heard of her? I'll
yes.
send you okay, because she talks a lot about these things, about these boxes that people try to, you know, fit in and mix, and that these expectations that are there. So, it just how you're expressing your story, your story of your life, it just reminds me of that, of all these boxes and stuff she talks about.
Yeah. I mean,
Um,
and if I didn't really
mm,
have to second get like really think through these things,
yes.
that would have been, I mean, that's just how you do it. That's
Mhm,
just, and I
mhm.
think a lot of people kind of feel the pressure of society.
Yes.
And not that it's like really there, like anybody's actually applying the pressure, but they feel that pressure.
Yeah, it's an unsaid expectation. It's an
Yes.
unsaid expectation that's there, and that we kinda put on ourselves. So then you find out how did you find out you were pregnant then? How
Oh,
did you not
just
find
the,
out? And the let me check, and then okay, so how was that
yep.
news breaking it to, Kyle, or did you guys, wait for the little result at the little what is that stick called? The pregnancy stick or whatever,
Yeah.
waiting for the
Whatever it's
little
called.
2 stra 2 ti
Yeah.
2 lines or whatever?
Oh
Were you
no.
guys waiting
I woke up
together?
in the middle of the night and was like, okay, I got to do this. I just like, I just kind of
You had a
felt
feeling.
different.
Yes.
Yeah, I just had a feeling. And so I took the test and it came across. So it's like 4 in the morning and I'm shaking my husband awake on Halloween in his parents' house in the room,
Oh
in
my
the room he
god.
grew up in to tell him that he's going to be a dad.
With his, band posters on the
Yeah.
wall and with and with all his awards from all the
Um,
ba and that is and
exactly.
so that was amazing. That's an amazing story in the middle of the night. No, was he
Yeah.
was he "Oh, thank you, honey. Okay, great, honey. Let me get
Pretty
back
much.
to
He was like,
sleep," or
"Why are you waking me up? I want to
Yeah,
go
yeah.
back to sleep." And I was like, "No, I think you need to hear this."
Oh my gosh, that's so exciting! But you're just like a giddy you're like this giddy child, like, "I'm
Oh
like, I
yeah.
can't wait till tomorrow. I can't wait till tomorrow to even take this test. Let me just take it now and then find out." And then, of course, not only do I know now, let me just wake him up now. It's like a kid waiting for, like, Christmas Day type of
Christmas.
thing.
Yes, that's exactly it. Like, maybe if I just go down half the flight of stairs and, like, peek around the corner. Yeah,
I
no,
may catch a glimpse. That's
exactly.
awesome. So so then, so that's your beginning
Mhm.
of your parenting story. And
Yes.
so take us into that journey of your pregnancy and your journey from there on.
Well, 6 days later, um, I got a phone another I was woken up way too early in the morning, um, from my dad calling me, and my dad does not like even back then, he didn't call, he texted.
Mhm,
Um,
mhm.
and I was all, and I just moved back to the States and I didn't know what was going on. And I had this like 37 missed calls from this number that I didn't know because
Oh
it
my
hadn't
gosh.
been programmed in my phone yet. And it was my dad, who was out of town for a work conference. And he said, "You need to get over to your mother's house right now. Her brother, Kent, and wife, Jane, just died in a car accident. You need to be over there and
Oh.
tell them to be there with her when she finds out or be the one that tells her."
Oh, so your dad knew before your mom?
Mhm.
How
They
did how did that happen?
I honestly, I'm not like that whole time
That
period is kind
detailed?
of a blur
Yeah,
to
yeah,
me,
yeah. Oh,
but
yeah,
I
most of those
I
things are become a blur. But
yeah,
then he's telling you and you go there. So this is 6 days up. So what time
yeah.
of day was it this moment when you actually spoke to him?
I mean, like 7 o'clock in the morning. It was light out, but it was still early. Like, I don't think I brushed my teeth as I was getting in the car to drive that 30 blocks to see my mom and to
Mm.
tell her this news.
Oh, wow.
Um, but I got there and she already knew. Her cousin
Mm.
had called her to see how she was doing.
Oh, I that's the oh, I know those
And
calls. So yeah, and she's like doing from what? Like she doesn't even know what's happened. She
yeah,
doesn't even know
exactly.
that he's yeah. Oh.
Yep. And so the next, I mean, we immediately got in the car and drove to Nebraska, which is where
Mhm.
they
Or your
were at
uncle.
the time.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Um, and started, started doing all of those things.
Had you ever
Um,
experienced death like is that as close to this in your family before that?
not not like that. I mean, this was
Mhm.
a tragic death. They
Yeah.
were hit by a semi truck driver that was driving too close.
Mhm.
Um, and it was instantaneous. I mean, I get to say that there are silver linings to it, but it was
Mhm.
horrid.
Yes.
Um,
Yeah,
and
that silver
I've
lining
had
of the fact that
grandparents and great grandparents and people that have just passed away from old age.
right,
Because
but
that's
nothing
going to
like
happen at
that.
some point. That's
Mhm.
But nothing like this before,
Mm.
really.
Did they have children? Did they have children?
Yes,
Mm.
they. My uncle Kent was actually quite a bit older, 12 years older than my mom. So
Mhm.
their kids, they were actually grandparents. Their
Oh, okay.
kids are older than I am, and
Mhm.
they had two daughters and two granddaughters, and they actually came in from Alaska.
Oh, that's where they live. Oh,
So
wow.
yeah,
Your family spread out for
super spread out. Yeah,
yes. So that's surprising a little bit because it's like here you are, you stayed pretty much close to where you grew up aside from when you left, but in
Yeah,
general, your family has spread out.
yeah.
That's why. So they came up. So how was it for you as a daughter seeing your mother go through this? And how was her way of dealing with this grief?
It was tough.
Mhm.
Um, she unfortunately has experienced a lot of grief in her life from a
Mhm.
very, very early age. Um, and as the niece, you know,
Mhm.
I'm close to the situation, but not the center of the situation. You know, like
Yeah.
my mother
Yes.
and their children and their
Mhm.
grandchildren are. So I was just a support person. And
Mhm.
also I was shooken to my core and very sad and devastated throughout this whole thing. But it, you know, it was definitely not my place to do certain things, or yeah, I was just there to, you know, make sure that people were eating food and drinking water, and if they needed, you know, a clean pair of socks, I would do the laundry or run to the store or those kind of things.
Yeah, just
Um,
being that support. Now, you had just found out 6 days, basically a
yeah,
week before that you were pregnant. Had you shared that news with anybody else in the family yet?
not a soul.
Not as so here you are that you had just experienced something so beautiful and happy in your little nucleus of you and Kyle
Hmm.
knowing that you guys were going to be parents and that happiness, and then 6 days later this parallel, right? This
Oh
parallel of
yeah.
then death, kind of just alongside.
And I
And you kind of
remember I had my cousin actually said, "You're pregnant, aren't you?" And I was like, "Oh no,
No.
because I
Really?
wasn't. I think I was drinking Shirley Temples as opposed to
Oh,
vodka
okay.
diets or something, you know.
So
Um,
they wow, they picked up on those
oh,
things. And so
yeah.
you were there as a support, and then so with your mom then because she had experienced so much grief in her life, what were the ways that you feel were her tools to cope with her grief? And had you seen her experience grief then was it with your grandparents? Were there from her
Yes.
side or yeah.
Her,
So
yeah.
yeah.
Um, so yeah, I mean, probably the thing I learned most from my mother was that
Mhm.
grief is never ending. You kind of
Yes.
learn to carry it with you.
Mhm.
Um, but it, you know, it doesn't just like magically disappear at any point.
Mhm.
And really the best thing you can do is talk about it. Talk about
Yes.
what you're feeling, talk about the person, you know, if it's a person that you've lost.
Mhm.
um, you know, we talk a lot about Kit and Jane, and we talk a lot about Grandma and Grandpa, um, and not in a, I mean, normal. Sometimes it leads to tears,
Yes,
but
but
we tell the
sometimes it could
happy
be just happy
stories.
mode.
Yeah, it can just
Yes,
be like,
yes, like,
oh, remember, you know,
over
remember this
yeah.
thing, remember that thing, um, and then you know that you have the conversation, and then you move on to the next thing. It doesn't
Mhm.
have to be a long drawn out conversation or a pity party. It can just be part of the narrative.
Yes, I like that. I like that. So then you learned that from her, and so then this happened at that moment, 6 days in now, at what
Mhm.
then when did you share the news of your pregnancy with the family?
It wasn't until Thanksgiving, so it was still a couple weeks after that.
Mhm.
Um, my aunt and uncle died on the 7th of November. And then Thanksgiving is, you know, the, I don't know, the third Thursday of the month or whatever. So it was a couple weeks
Mhm.
after that. We shared it with our parents. Because we thought, you know, I mean, and there's no right time.
Yeah, yeah. You never know, like
There,
when it's
yeah,
because you want to you want to be sensitive to what they're going through too. So sharing this like happy
yeah,
happy moment for you guys in that moment. Yeah, you just didn't know what was the right.
right.
So then you shared it then, and then you have siblings as well.
Yep.
Yeah. So did you didn't share
And
it with them
I
yet?
mean,
Only with your parents?
we shared it with our parents first and then siblings.
Okay.
And
And then,
um,
okay.
it wasn't like, okay, now don't tell anyone. It was just, we felt like this was the first grandchild on both sides.
Yes.
So I'm the
Oh, that
oldest
is a
in my
huge.
family
It's
and
a
my
moment. Yeah.
husband's the oldest. Yeah.
Yeah. That's a
So we
momentous
wanted
kind
it
of
to
moment.
be
Yeah.
just them, and then we shared it with our siblings and that kind of, with it. I mean, we weren't shy to tell people.
Yeah, after that,
Yeah.
okay. So then you, had your pregnancy, you
Mhm.
experienced your pregnancy, everything was fine,
Everything was
um,
normal. Yep.
everything was normal, and then you go to your which week checkup?
It was about 32 weeks checkup. Um, and it was the day after we had bought the house
Mm,
to move into,
uh,
because
oh,
I
that's
wasn't.
why you said the night. That's
Yep.
exactly why you said.
Yep. Because
Mhm,
it was yeah. So
okay,
I think we bought the house May 1st, and we went to the doctor's on May 2nd, or maybe the
mhm,
3rd. I don't remember. I don't remember exactly, but it was in
mhm,
May. And for just what we thought was a routine ultrasound. I'm kind of a larger girl, and so I wasn't gaining weight like they had. They kind of expect you to, but I wasn't a twig to begin with. So they're like, "Oh,
mhm,
things are just shifting, but
mhm,
insurance will cover this, so why not?" I was like,
mhm.
"Heck yeah! Any excuse I can take to see my
Get to
baby."
hear. Yes, get to.
Um, and we heard the words that no parent should ever have to hear. Something's not right. Let me go talk to the doctor. And the technician left the room and could have been gone for 5 minutes or 5 years. I
It felt
Who
like
knows?
5. Did
Yeah,
it feel like 5 years? Yeah.
yeah. Um, and said, I can't tell you anymore, but the doctor can. So drive across town to where your doctor is, and she'll fill you in.
Mhm,
And luckily, my husband was with me, and he had enough sense in him to say, "You are not driving," because we had met there in our, we had each taken our own car and met at the doctor's appointment, because he was supposed to go back to work and I was supposed to go back to do my things. And luckily, he was smart enough to say, "Nope, you're coming with me," because I probably wouldn't have made it there to the doctor's office. Um, and when we got to the doctor's office, they said, "We don't really know yet. We have an appointment with a specialist for you tomorrow, but this
oh,
is not good, and more than likely will not be a positive experience."
mm. Now, these words that you're hearing, and this is coming from, like, and having to wait to the next day. So the 5 minutes that the technician might have been gone, that felt like 5 years.
Mhm.
That evening, I can't even imagine, the waiting, and if you already kind of seem to be a insomniac so did you sleep at all that night?
I remember laying down because I was just exhausted. My body was tired, and my brain couldn't was on information overload. I couldn't take anymore. Um, but I think there was about 8 years there that I didn't sleep,
Mm,
not
mm,
just a night.
mhm.
Yeah, I and I think anybody in the same position would probably do the same thing.
Yes.
No, I didn't. I don't think I slept. I don't feel
Mhm.
like I slept.
Right.
Um,
So you go into the office, with the specialist, and
mhm.
then
And they
what
poke
were
you and they prod
yeah.
you, and basically they just all they could really tell me. Well, first, they do an ultrasound, um, and then they do the other kind of ultrasound, which is far more evasive.
Mhm, mhm,
Excuse me. And then they sent me for an MRI, which are very uncomfortable for any reason. Um,
mhm,
but basically, they took me into a room by myself and put me into this big tunnel. Stripped me down
mm,
to nothing,
mhm,
put me into this big tunnel, and told me not to move for an hour
mm,
as they took picture, whatever did whatever the MRI machine did. Um, in a silent room, except for this loud machine thing that you're sitting in the middle of. And it was, oh, they had to keep saying, quit moving, quit moving. And I was like, how do
Mm.
I cry and stop moving at the same
Oh
time?
my God.
Can't be
Oh.
done. And, no one else can be in that room with you because it's radioactive or what, like it's
Mm.
not healthy just to have people hanging out. So I was by myself in my own little world of pity party. Um, and they basically came back and told us that our child's head was not formed properly, not like
Mm.
the brain didn't form the way that it should have. And
Mm.
so I guess what normally happens is spinal fluid is created and the brain absorbs it, and then it kind of, works in a system like that. Well, since the brain hadn't fully formed, that spinal fluid had nowhere to go.
Mm.
So there was a little bitty brain, but her head was huge
Enlarged. Mm.
because of that spinal fluid.
And when had been the last ultrasound you had prior to that? So at week 32, had it been like 3 weeks, 4 weeks, and they had not noticed anything like that in terms of the development till week 32? Maybe just because of how a child develops. Is that what it
Right.
is because of the timeline?
I remember them saying that they should, like, normally, that not that they should have, but this is normally caught at like week 12.
Wow.
Um, but for whatever reason, it wasn't.
Wow.
Um, and so, and I think, I mean, it's not like I had ultrasounds every week or anything. I probably had
Correct.
2 or 3 along the way.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but there was nothing out of the ordinary
In the yeah, before. Now,
before
did
that.
you already know the gender prior? Did you already know your baby's gender before the 32 weeks,
So
or
no,
you guys
um,
were going to do like wait till
we were just
till
going to
the baby
wait,
was born? Hmm.
because, um, the nursery was going to be Dr. Seuss regardless.
Oh, we got
Um,
a Dr. Seuss fan here.
yes, a very large Dr. Seuss fan.
Wait,
Um,
when's Dr. Seuss
and
Day? February something? No, when is Dr. Seuss Day?
March
The
2nd.
they March. You see,
Mhm.
you could tell me.
That's his
I'm
birthday. Oh yeah.
like, I'm like, I know my kids do something at school when they were little in elementary, something on Dr.
Yep.
Seuss Day. So that was gonna be what it's gonna be anyway. So
Yeah, so it didn't
and
really
so then
matter, and
and at 32, when you were hearing this diagnosis, you still didn't know the gender either.
mm-mm. Um, but we decided to find out
Mhm.
because, like, we didn't know if, like, I already anyone that's been pregnant, I think, understands that there's such a deep connection there from the second
Mhm.
that you find out. So I already knew this child,
Mhm.
and I knew their personality,
Mm.
even though nobody else really did. Um, and I just wanted to be able to uh, talk to them as a person as opposed to,
Mm.
um,
Baby,
a baby.
jelly bean,
Yeah, jelly
jelly
bean or
bean.
peanut or what. Um, and we had our names picked out. We just, had a
Mhm.
boy name and a girl name, um, and so, we weren't going to find out. But when we found out that things were not going to turn out the way we had hoped, we decided we needed to know.
Mhm.
Um, and because we didn't know if we were going to have time with Madelyn, so obviously she
That's
she
right.
was a girl.
A girl.
Um, yeah, and
So
we didn't.
did they tell you anything at that moment? So they say the brain. So what did they tell you then in terms of lifespan or anything in that moment when they tell you what's happening to the brain?
They pretty much said, we don't know anything, but
Hmm.
you will not have a child that lasts with you very long,
Oh my gosh. And then you had to
if at
wait
all.
and then did you wait till you're like labor till you go into labor and everything at that point?
Um, no, we were told that we would have to do a C-section, like a classic C-section where they just
Mhm.
basically take a knife and start drawing
Oh,
on you. It feels like
because of this because of this because of her
her
situation, of
head.
her delicate
Yes,
situation and the head, they had to,
yes.
yeah.
Um, which again was a silver lining to me because
Mhm.
I don't know that I could have.
Mm.
I mean, I could have because I would have had to, but I don't know that I
Right.
would have wanted to labor
Even
through.
push. Yeah,
Yeah,
labor. It's just kinda like the moment of having to stay still in a MRI machine and trying to cry and stay still. Here
mhm,
it's the other way around. It's kinda like having to move and push while you're just grieving so much would have been very hard.
yeah.
Not that it's not possible, but yes. Oh, so, so then you then went into you had the C-section how many weeks then after the,
It was basically
diagnosis?
2.5 weeks later. They allowed us to continue the pregnancy as long as it was safe for me.
Mhm.
And I was having, if they weren't every day, it was every other day checkups with just my regular doctor. Um,
And heartbeat all the time, there was a
mhm,
heartbeat.
mhm.
Mhm.
But up until the minute we delivered, they said we don't know if she will be alive or if she'll be
Mm.
stillborn or she may go home with you, she may not.
Oh gosh, that uncertainty.
Just basically be prepared for anything. Um, and so we pretty much walked into the hospital with the clothes on our back. I mean, and it was, we went to the doctor and they said, okay, tomorrow is the day. It has to be. And but but we had 2.5 weeks to prepare.
Mm.
Um, but I
Prepare for what? That's the
yeah,
thing, prepare
exactly.
for what? Prepare
Um,
for the because you still didn't even know what the outcome was gonna be, so you didn't even
mm-mm.
know, like, do we are we excited about giving birth? Are we like, what? I can't imagine that.
And
Oh.
so we kind of figured that we would walk in with basically the clothes on our back. That was about it. And if we had the luxury of needing a car seat, we had one picked out and we would have grandma go get it from the store.
Mhm.
And if we needed an outfit, you know, I
Mhm.
take that back. I think we brought a couple of outfits that I
Mhm.
had um,
Already bought, probably,
already
yeah.
bought, because you find out you're pregnant and you're
Yeah, of
like, oh, I need
course.
all the
Oh,
cute
yeah.
things.
If you already had the nursery,
Yeah.
already had you already prepared had you already made the crib and everything by week 32?
So, no, but only because we had just moved into this house.
Oh, ooh, there's another silver lining there.
Yes.
Another
Um,
silver lining.
so
Ooh,
we had basically picked out everything, but hadn't purchased anything
yes,
because where was I
because
going
you
to put
didn't have
it?
a house to put it in.
Yeah. I think I had maybe a couple of onesies, and I think I got a really, really good deal on a stroller. So I had a stroller, and that was literally it. Um,
Wow.
and my official due date wasn't until July.
Mm.
So I was like,
You have time, you got
we
time.
had enough time. Yeah, I
Yeah, you
mean,
had time.
I'd done all the heavy lifting. I'd picked it all out, and I kind of designed everything. It just needed to be like put together.
Mhm.
But again, that was a silver lining. I didn't have to take down a crib. I didn't have to. There were very few things that I had to return, and I had loving people in my life that were like, "We got this for you."
You got to care. So take us then to that moment. Then you have the C-section.
Yeah,
She is born, and then
and she was born
did
alive.
she was born alive. And
Mhm.
how long were you able to hold her in your arms?
We held her. She was set down long enough for her weight to register on the scale, and other than that, she was held her entire life. Um, I wasn't in the right mind, but someone was in the right mind enough to tell my parents and his parents and grandparents and aunts and uncles
Mm,
and great aunts and uncles to be there. And we had friends that would came to the hospital to meet her, and we
mm.
had a photographer, which at the time was not really a thing. I know it's much more of a
Mhm.
thing now, um, but I
'Cause
luckily knew.
this is 10 years ago, right?
Yeah, this is
10?
2010.
Yeah, yeah.
Um, only really really wealthy fancy people got to have photographers at their child's
Mm,
birth. um,
mhm.
but a very good friend of mine who actually was a photographer who was a photographer and also volunteered her time for Now I Lay Me Down to Sleep. Um,
Yes, and that I need to remember to put that in the show notes.
oh
So
yeah.
it's an organization that helps keep those memories of, photography for families.
Mhm.
Actually, you explain it. You explain
Yeah.
it better.
So I actually didn't know about the organization at the time. I just had a friend that was a photographer and was like, I think I need you because I don't know if I'll ever get pictures.
Mm,
But Now I Lay Me Down to Sleep is an organization that where photographers will come into the hospital and take pictures of you and your family with your child. And oftentimes those are the only memories you have.
mhm,
And they do it all for free. They donate their time, they donate their talent. Um, the pictures can be edited and retouched if necessary.
mhm.
It is it is one of those
Up to the family's
organizations that I
discretion,
wish,
and
yeah,
it's up to the family's
yeah,
discretion of what it is they want to kind of remain as that memory that they have with their child,
exactly,
if they were stillborn or if they passed away a few hours after birth.
exactly.
So how long was it then that she was alive?
She lived for 8 hours.
Oh,
And one of my silver linings is she was born on May 19th, 2010, and she passed in the very early morning hours of May 20th. And so I get to celebrate her birthday, and it is not
mm,
tainted with the day of her death.
oh, wow.
Um, so every year I do something special for her birthday, and then I don't get out of bed the next day.
And that's so important, Crystal, that you allow yourself permission to grieve that day, even 10 years later, that you just allow yourself to have those feelings and to be okay with that. And that I think is important for people to know that it's okay
It
if
is
that
okay.
is what you need to do for your own grief. It's okay. There's no rule book of how grief has to be lived or experienced, and having grace with yourself is the
Right.
most important, and that is wonderful that you're able to allow yourself to have that uh, moment to really just stay in bed and be okay with it, and not um not expect anything differently. And maybe there's going to be a day in which you won't
Mm-hmm.
maybe you won't need to be in bed. You don't know, right? There may be a
Right.
day you might, but there's doesn't have to be a particular date that you set for that.
Right.
um, Now, what do you do to celebrate her birthday every year? What do you do?
It just
What
kind of
is that thing?
depends. Every year is a
Mhm.
little different. One year I just went and hung out at the local coffee shop and bought donuts for anyone that like wanted a donut.
Oh, I love it. So giving back, like
Hmm.
contribute, all about giving back.
Yeah.
Awesome. That's beautiful.
It just kind of depends on what I'm feeling that year. Like some years I
Mm,
do something a little bigger. One year I had a volunteer event at my house where we like painted boxes and things that were going to the NICU at a local hospital.
mm,
Um, Sometimes my husband and I just go and get an ice cream or a piece of cake or something. Um, but I really want to mark that day every year
mm.
in
I
some form or
love that.
fashion.
I love that because you're just keeping her memory alive in all these different ways, either by doing something contribution like the NICU, or donuts, or an ice cream, something in some way that is just keeping that that day. Of course, you keep her memory alive every day, as any mother would. But the fact that you celebrate her birthday is just so beautiful. Now,
Mhm.
what tools do you use for your grief? What have been some of these tools in the last 10 years that you've used to help you with your grieving process and your mourning process?
Well, I'm not sure that I knew that they were tools at the beginning,
Oh,
um,
tools could be
but
even just the fact that you rely on friends, on,
oh
you know what I
yeah,
mean? What were the reasons? Yeah, what did you do? What did you do to to help you through, or what heck do you continue to do? Because it doesn't end. So
Yeah,
it
no.
just changes a little bit every time, and
Hmm.
we're gonna get to that afterwards of the kind of things you're doing now. But in those, first days, weeks, first years, what were the things that helped you?
One thing that I didn't do very well, and that if I, knock on wood, ever had to do it again, something, like this, um, I probably would have allowed more. I wouldn't have isolated myself as much as I did,
Mm.
um,
From everybody,
from
from the
everyone.
family, from everyone. So from your husband too? Do you feel like
To
there
some
was,
extent, yeah.
to some extent, even so you guys moved to your new home, and was there even was there joy among that aspect of it, or not at all? Do you even recall the
I
joy
don't,
about having your new home? No?
not
Yeah, it's
not
probably a
really.
blur. Yeah.
Yeah, it was
Mhm.
it, it was a blur. And to be perfectly honest,
Mhm.
I lived on a twin mattress in the living room for like a month
Mhm.
and a half, because
Mhm.
I wasn't allowed to go up the stairs after my
Oh,
C-section.
recovering. Oh, yeah.
Um, so I literally like laid on this bed in my sofa in my living room, um, staring at the wall or the TV or whatever. Like I really couldn't do much, and that was a blessing and a curse, in that I didn't have things to do. Like I didn't have priorities and obligations.
You didn't were you working you weren't working at that time?
I was working, I was trying to build my own business at the time.
Okay.
So that just basically got shut down. Like
Just okay.
I couldn't function. Um, I
So
did,
that is a
I did the bare
blessing there,
minimum.
because yeah,
Yes.
that was a blessing there, because it was not like, oh, you were gonna go on maternity leave and you had this number of weeks and then you had to come back even if you maybe did not feel like it or were ready for it. You didn't have that timeline of you have to be okay to go back by
Mhm.
this date. Um,
But also in
so
some ways,
yeah.
it might have been helpful to have
Mm,
that.
because it would have given you a reason to get out
Yes.
of. Yes.
Yeah. There's
But
there's two
here,
sides to every coin.
yes, but you know what though? Again, that's just that is just the cards you were dealt in that particular moment in time.
Hmm.
That's what would happen, and those are the the steps you took, and that's okay. That's just what happened then. Um, and the fact that you had these scars that were healing outwardly as you're here with these inner scars, that oh.
Yeah. And in some ways, I never wanted my outward scars to heal, because I
Mm,
felt validated with my emotional scars. The
mm.
longer it took for my my wounds to my external
Physical work, yes.
physical wounds to
Yes.
heal, the more I felt validated and vindicated and able to grieve inwardly.
Yes, because you didn't have, again, you were using that as also permission to not get out of bed because you couldn't, because you were
Right.
healing from a surgery, right? So it was kind of like that, a little bit of that crutch to some extent of like, if these don't heal, then I can, outside, it could still give me that space, like you're saying, to
Exactly.
just continue to feel like I'm feeling right now and not have to feel like I have to be okay and out and about. And so what shifted at that? When did the mattress leave the living room?
Oh, that's a good question. I don't know, it was a pretty comfy mattress. It was one of those, like, it had a remote control and you could lift up the head, and it was basically like a glorified sofa. If it could
Well,
still
you're
be in my living room, it would be.
I actually have one of those. It's so funny. We went and bought a mattress. We needed just what is it called? Just a frame for our mattress.
Mhm.
But the ones they had at the store were the kind that do that, the up and down. They
Oh.
came with, it was like one that came with the mattress. It's kind of like, it's free on this weekend. It comes with the mattress. And we're like, okay, that's gonna be really weird that we have one of those hospital beds type of thing with remote control. but it's so handy.
It
I'm like,
is.
"Oh, it's so good." I could sit and read a book without having to, like, awkwardly hold my head,
Yeah.
so I can see why you wanted to keep that mattress in the living
Yeah.
in the living room. So, yeah, so did you have your family there? Did you allow then you said you closed your circle. Who did you allow in that circle, in your space? Who did you allow,
Um,
if any, in the
Very
first I
close
don't know if you
friends and
Mhm,
family,
mhm.
um, because I think they knew me well enough to know that, which is good because I don't even know that I knew myself. That sometimes it's nice just to be around people and realize that, there are other humans in the world, but not have to entertain them or put on a show for
Yes.
them, or, and those were
Just be,
the kind of, just
just
be.
be.
Yeah.
Yes.
They
Yeah.
would
It's
they would come over, and the TV would be on, and we just sit on the sofa or in my reclinable
Mhm.
bed, and just stare at the TV, or they'd take me to the movies, or we'd go to Target. Target is like my favoriteest place on the whole world, and just walk around because I hadn't been to Target in months because I couldn't drive and I couldn't do
So
all
that
these
was your
things.
Disney.
But
That was your Disney
yeah,
World for you. So,
exactly.
and then yeah, and so then when you would hang out with family and friends, would the conversation come up of the feelings or the anything, or did you not talk about uh Madeline, and you call her Maddie, is that correct? Do
Hmm.
you call her Maddie? Okay.
Yep.
Did you not talk about Maddie? What was
Um,
the first few months? Do you remember if that was talked about, or was it more like let's just be here and but not necessarily that would they bring up the emotions? Just curious.
I don't know that I was in a place. People were very respective of kind of where I was and where I wanted to be, and so if I brought Maddie up, then we'd talk about her.
Mhm.
Um, but I don't really remember her being brought up by anyone other than me.
Mm. So by you bringing her name up, it would give permission to, okay, this
Yeah.
is a subject we can talk about. That's actually something very valid to share, because a lot of times some of the people that listen to this podcast are people that might have not experienced grief themselves, and I actually get a lot, and I'm sure you probably get these kind of outreaches to people reaching out and saying, "Oh, I don't know what to say with so and so passed away," like, and the not knowing what to say. And I'm like, sometimes you don't have to say anything. Just show that you're there. Just be there. Right?
Hmm.
It's this thing that we don't talk enough about grief and death, that we've, to normalize it enough to have these conversations of even knowing what is okay or not okay to do in these the circumstances. And for everybody's different. Where everybody's needs are different. So
Exactly.
not yeah there so in your case, it was only when you would bring up the subject that talk about her death and talking about her, that then people would then engage in that aspect of a conversation. So
At least
take us
early
then
on.
down and early on. So you really, so for you, for coping at the beginning with this heavy grief, was really allowing yourself to feel the emotions you were feeling and allowing yourself to be in those emotions for the first few weeks,
Hmm.
then opening that circle to some of your close friends and family, having that as support, and then just people that would just be there for you and with you. And then how did that transition into coming out into the world with this heaviness, and at what point did it maybe start becoming a little lighter?
I feel like, women of a certain age, especially in the Midwest, it is, what's your name? What do you do? How many kids do you have? Is kind of the progression of questions when you meet a new person. Um, and I never knew how to answer that question,
Mm,
um, because I felt like there were so many movies. Like, I didn't want to lie because I'm a
mhm.
mother, and her name is Madeline,
Yes.
and she would be 10, you know. Um, but I also, that's super heavy. to get into
To just a
someone,
random,
just a
yes, yeah,
yeah.
to somebody you just meet, yeah.
Um, and so I always felt like I was playing this split second game of are we going to be friends when I would meet a new person, because it was like I can lie to you now and tell you I have no kids and rip away a little piece of my soul right now, and but save you the emotional drama of going into that, or I can have that heavy conversation now if I think we're going to, you know, be acquaintances long term, because at some point it's going to come up. Um, and so I was constant, like, every time I'd meet a new person, I'd have to make this split second decision, like,
Mm.
do I like you? Do I think we're going to have a relationship together? And relationship meaning just,
Wow.
like
Yeah,
friendship or
yeah, that you're
whatever.
gonna get to see them more than just that one time that you ran into them into
Right.
a grocery store. So then what was your go-to kind of phrase to those that you didn't feel like that you were gonna see, like, in that split second decision that you weren't gonna probably see again after that conversation? What was kind of your automated kind of, script per se that you would say to the ones that you would just kinda go over the yeah,
Yeah. More
the
often
very
than
b
not, people
yeah.
would just say, do you have kids? No. Okay.
Mm,
If they pressed, and I've had a few people, um, strangers and otherwise,
mhm,
um, kind of press, well, why don't you have kids? Or when are you going to have kids? Or what? Um,
mhm.
and early on, I would get like just smoke coming out of my ears mad and just be, like blow up. Well, I have a daughter. Her name is Madelyn. She is dead. I hope you feel good for asking I mean, maybe
Wow.
not to that extent, but
But
like
that's how it felt. That's
that's
how
how
it
I
felt
felt.
inside. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. It's so interesting because a lot of times, yeah, those script conversations that we do to get to know somebody are really much even like that. I think I even did it with you. I'm like, do you have a pet? I was like, because my dog came as we were
Oh yeah.
talking in the Zoom. I'm like, oh, you should get one. I'm like, what? Maybe she doesn't even like animals. I don't know. But here I am imposing my own things into somebody else's story. And that's the thing I think we do. We impose our own stories into somebody else, but it's
Yeah.
without like it really is kind of like those, generic, like, "Oh, what's the weather like today? Oh, nice
Oh
day,
yeah.
isn't it?"
Yeah,
Those
exactly.
kind of right? It's like your true icebreakers, I guess, those icebreakers that we do of, yeah, are you married? Like, and maybe if
Right.
it's to try to find, I think, common ground with another person to try to then be able to feel like, "Oh, you do? Oh, what school do they go to? Da, 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 da," or you know
Right.
what I mean? It's that kind of gateway. So it's not done in a with a bad intention, but it's amazing from even hearing your story of how these kind of things can, yeah, a lot of times bring up all these other emotions. So thank you for shedding a light on that because it will kind of give us awareness to of how it is we can approach somebody else when we're just meeting somebody, not necessarily ask the
I mean, and I don't think that it's
yeah.
a bad conversation. I don't think it's a bad question to ask.
Right. Just be ready for the answer.
Just be ready for the answer.
Just be
Um,
ready for the
you know,
answer.
and
Not
and maybe read the room a little bit, because I'm sure I
Yes.
didn't go from all smiles and happy to
Yeah.
biting this poor lady's head off, you know.
Mm.
But I try, and sometimes I do ask questions that may not have been particularly appropriate, but I try
Mm.
not to do like 47 follow-up questions. Like, why not?
Yes, yes.
Why not? Well,
Mm,
what about this? Well, what
mhm,
about that? Like that was what really what
mm,
continues to get to me is, oh, you don't have kids. Maybe you should adopt.
mm.
Oh, you know what? I never thought of that.
Yeah, as if because okay, so now share about that. Did you guys go into did you ever after that moment, did you ever think about like you just said adopt?
Mhm.
Did you guys try again to get pregnant? What was that like? How do you even wrap your head around that? Like thinking about children after that and did you
Um,
after the
yes,
experience you
we
felt?
did.
Mhm.
Um,
Mhm. Wait,
Madeline
was
had
that one of those sorry, if by chance,
no,
did
no,
that
that's a
sound like one of those questions? Okay.
no. No,
I'm
no.
like, wait, did I have, okay, yeah. So
No.
what, just now I'm like, oh, wait. Yeah. How do you wrap your head around then thinking about that? And yeah, what happened next?
So we kind of just went into like, I'm a child of the 80s and 90s, and I was always taught that if you try hard enough, you'll get whatever you want. You want to be president, well, just work really hard at it and you'll become president. You want to be a rap
Mhm.
star, okay. You're a
Mhm.
white girl from the Midwest, just learn
Go
to
ahead.
rap,
Let's do it. Mhm.
and you'll be a famous rap star. um so we kind of were like, okay, well, at that point we had learned that 1 in 4 pregnancies ends in a loss
Mhm.
of some at
Mhm.
some point along the way. um we're like, okay, well, I guess we're one of those lucky
Yeah.
couples that,
I am one of those as
yeah.
well. My
um
first pregnancy, so I can understand
yeah,
to a glimpse of that. I'm one of those statistics, I
yeah.
guess. We can join the club of that statistic. But so then when you then so you knew that you could join the club, but then at what point are you having even that conversation of, do we even try? Do we want even to try to have another child?
Well, first we needed to find out what actually happened with Madeline.
Mm,
um they did an autopsy and they did all the thing. And I don't know, they told me that's what they do, and I was like, okay, I'm sure I signed a paper
mhm.
that said, yes, please perform an
Mhm.
autopsy on
Just to
my
find
my
out, yeah.
infant. Yeah.
Well, partly because you a lot of times, and maybe in that moment you would have not necessarily wanted answers, but maybe later on you would have, the
Right.
why,
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, months later, it could have been the next day, but it felt like months.
Mhm.
um we found out that she had a genetic chromosomal imbalance, which basically meant she had, if you think of chromosomes as a puzzle, um, she was missing a couple pieces. So, you put the puzzle together and you have a couple spots. Well, those spots happen to be important spots. And that's what kept her brain from fully forming. And they said, okay, well, this could be a fluke, like it is a fair
Mhm.
majority of the time, or one of her parents could have a chromosomal translocation that was passed along to her, and that's why she wasn't able to sustain her own life. Um, so, of course, I was like, well, we need to know, because it really did change the protocol of what we did next. If it was just a fluke, then we try again naturally. And if it wasn't a fluke, then the best course of action was to get science involved.
Mhm.
Um, and so we found out that it was not a fluke. Madeline had a chromosomal imbalance because I have a chromosomal translocation, which means I have all of the puzzle pieces, they're just in the wrong order. So when I go to give some of them to my children, the likelihood that they will get the pieces that they need is less than 6%.
Wow.
Um,
And
at
how
first, we
at that
didn't want to
point,
know.
yeah.
At
Oh,
first,
you
we
didn't
we
want to know.
only we
Okay.
wanted to know if it was, like, we wanted to know what the cause was. We didn't know who had the cause, like if it
Yes,
was
because
him
of
or
the
I.
right, because of partly because of the blame that
Hmm.
could be associated with that. Yeah,
Yeah, the
with the
blame
knowing.
and the guilt,
Yeah.
and
Mhm.
um, but one night in the middle of the night, I woke up just screaming bloody murder. I
Mm.
killed my daughter! I killed my daughter! I killed my daughter!
Oh god.
Um, and Kyle was like, okay, well, if this is how you're gonna treat yourself, we're gonna find out
Mm.
if it's valid to feel that way, basically.
Mm.
Like, if you're gonna act like you did this, then
Carrying that, yeah,
yeah,
carrying that.
if you're gonna carry
But
that weight,
this is before you even knew you had it. You were already feeling that even in your
right?
sleep. You already felt that responsibility.
Yeah. And so, yes, I was the one that had the translocation.
Mhm.
Um, and so there
Which you
was,
have no control
which
about,
I
which
have
is
no
not your
control over,
fault,
right?
right? So you did not kill your daughter
Right,
because yeah, and you know that. It's just of course all these kind of things are the
right,
things that you still can you're still allowed to feel them.
right,
You're still allowed to feel them, but the part yeah, the when we think rationally, we know that it's not, but the feelings you can't stop what it is you feel, you just
right.
have to.
I like to say logically, I fully
Yes, that's the
understand and
right word.
comprehend.
Yes, that's the right word,
Emotionally,
logically. Yes.
I'm a mess.
Yes. No, and it's absolutely valid. It's so valid to feel. And that's the thing. A lot of times people don't validate those emotions of how we feel. It's like they're always trying to be like, but it's not, and it's okay. Those emotions are valid. They are valid. Again, it doesn't mean that they are
Right,
logic, but they're valid. They're
right.
valid. They're real. They're real. Um, so then so could even science even be an option at that point? Because if it's 6%, could they still do something if you guys were to decide to specifically choose genetically and stuff? Could they do that or no?
Yes. So we
They could
actually
have.
went through IVF 3 times. Um, and it was basically just to have a healthy pregnancy. Like I wasn't saying I want blonde hair and blue eyes and
Mhm.
8 feet tall. And I
Right, right, right,
just,
right. No, you just want a child that is actually
yeah.
born.
And they said, statistically speaking, that if I were to get pregnant naturally 100 times,
Oof.
99 of those pregnancies would end poorly.
Oh,
And even going into that, I, I couldn't wrap my head around doing
no, no,
that.
no. Wow.
Even if there's enough time to get pregnant 100 times in a
No,
lifetime,
no,
I
no,
don't know.
no.
Um, so to me, it just made sense. Okay, we,
Mm-hmm.
and we were very lucky in that we had health insurance that covered a portion of
Mm-hmm.
IVF. Um, so what we did was the basic IVF protocol, but then we did day 3 and day 5 testing, which
Mm.
um, basically they make the little test tube babies and they let them grow for 3 days. And if they grow to 3 days, then they pluck out a cell and they test that to see.
To see if that mutation was
Yeah.
there. Mm.
And then they go again for another 2 days, and if it makes it 2 more days, then they pluck another cell and they test it to
Mm.
see if that mutation is there. um, and that each time was a roller coaster of emotions,
I can imagine.
um, on top of the hormonal roller coaster,
Oh, yeah,
because
because
they
you're
just,
on
yeah, you're like
jacked
crazy.
up on
Yeah,
jacked up on hormones, yeah.
on all these things that you are not supposed to be jacked up on. um,
Oh gosh.
and basically our protocol, as I remember it, was a numbers game. Like, because and at the time I could have said, oh well, x number percent could do this and x number percent could come out this way, and but basically they said, okay, what we want to do is we want to get as many eggs as we can so that we can fertilize as many as we
Mm.
can, and hopefully we will
One.
get
Hmm.
one.
So let's get 100 so that one
Right.
that kind of mentality, yeah.
Yeah.
The 6 because there's that 6%.
So when most women would go through the process and maybe get 8 eggs at retrieval day, I would get like 37,
Oof.
which
And this happened 3 times.
three
This happened
times.
3
Yeah.
times.
And basically that meant to me like I am 3 times or 4 times more crazy than normal people going through
Wow.
IVF, because I am 4 times pumped full of
Wow.
hormones and things. Um, so to me, it's like, oh, it's just a numbers game. You just keep doing it. And again, my mentality of just try hard enough and you'll get whatever you want. Well,
Mm.
if you can get 8, I can get 80. And
Mm.
if I get 80, then that's, will work out in my favor. And, so the number they'd report back on day 3 and day 5, and oh, numbers are great. Okay, numbers could be better, but they're still really good. And then it would come down to our last chance and they'd say, we got nothing for you.
Mm.
And that is tough. I don't know how else to put it.
No, no, it's just, I don't think there's another word to put it. Now, at what point do you decide that this is just not what you want to keep doing and feeling every single time like, when do you guys make a decision to just stop?
For some reason, we made the decision from the get-go that we were going to do it 3 times. And I know that part of that was insurance will help cover a portion of
Mm-hmm.
this for 3 cycles. And so early on, we're just like, okay, we're going to try this 3 times. And in my mind, it was like, oh, well, that'll result in like 6 babies because, you'll have, or we'll have extra times left over because it's just a numbers game. And,
Mm-hmm.
when you go
You
through
kept on, yeah.
IVF,
Your accountant brain was working there. You're like, numbers,
yes,
numbers, numbers, numbers.
exactly. And well, the likelihood of multiples when you're going through
Mm-hmm.
fertility
IVF.
treatments
Oh,
is,
yes.
yeah, blah, blah, blah. And da, da, da. I'm like, we're going to have a litter of kids
You had all
from,
this hope. Yeah.
so
The
of
hope.
course.
Yeah.
Um, and each time it did, and we went all over the Midwest. We went to Chicago for some treatments. We went to Colorado for treatments. um, we I kind of felt when we were done that we had exhausted our IVF options.
And when you come to that decision, does that feel like another? So you're experiencing grief every single month that you go in, and so for three months, is that about that? So for every
Actually,
is that
it was
how
over
long does it
three
take?
years.
Oh, really? So
Yeah.
those 3 times I was just thinking here, cycles. I was just thinking, oh, 3 month cycles. I'm like, like
Yeah,
one
no,
month,
there's months
fertility.
of prep, and then there's the
Oh my
letdown. Like they fill
gosh,
you full
no.
of the, you're full of you're basically I was
Wow.
basically pregnant for
I
4
definitely
years.
don't know this journey of IVF and at all, because yeah, I did not know that it was that long of time. So 3 years for 3 different, times that you tried. And then so when you go through all these, yeah, the hormonal, the and the grief experience every single time that you realize that those eggs were not viable, uh and then when you make that decision after that third time that this is the end, then did you experience then grief all over again, or like in terms of having to really know that that was not a box you were going to check?
Yes. And I think that I didn't really fully allow myself to grieve until the end of that last cycle,
Hmm.
because I always just had a little bit of hope.
Yes.
Um,
And it's okay. And it's okay. It's
yeah,
okay. Because that hope is what just keeps us waking up that next day. That's okay. It's not naive to have hope,
right.
It isn't. It's a survival. I think, yeah. It's for survival. I
Yeah,
believe
I mean,
so.
and that's all I was trying to do was survive.
Yeah.
And it's
Yes.
never that I thought I would replace Madelyn. I never
No,
in my,
no, it's never about that. Yeah,
um,
not about that. Yeah.
in fact, early on in this journey, like we got married in the Catholic Church, and so you do all these things, and we
Hmm.
had like a weekend where they're like, okay, let's talk about how many kids you want to have, and so it was always kind
Oh,
of
those
a,
the
yeah,
marital kind of weekends. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Hmm.
and so it was always kind of like a running joke that, and at the point I don't even remember anymore, like one of us wanted 3 kids and one of us wanted 2,
Hmm.
and we're like, well, this way we both get what we want. We'll just have 2 living kids and a third angel baby, and then we both get
Mm-hmm.
our aunt. And so it was kind of a joke. um, Again, all coping mechanisms and
Yes.
ways to,
Yeah, because humor becomes that sometimes too. It becomes that way of kind of coping
yes.
too. No, so
Yeah.
then take us then a little bit of the now, So it's now 10 years. I want to go back actually. Well, let's see. How long ago did you start your company? And then afterwards, let's move on to what happened last year that you just released this year. So
Okay.
I'm like, let's just jump, because so all this, everything you've gone through, all this grief has now birthed
Yes.
something different. So
Yes.
let's talk about these births.
So it was pretty much 5 years, almost to the day of, it was almost exactly Madelyn's fifth birthday when, like a bolt of lightning, the idea and the concept behind Sharing Solace hit me like a bolt of lightning. It was crazy. Um,
Sharing Solace. That's the
yep,
name of your company. Okay, so
yep.
Sharing Solace. Okay, so
Um,
you get the name. Does the name come to your mind? Does the idea of what is it that came in that moment?
the
That
idea
aha
that came
moment,
in that
as
moment
Oprah would say.
was the
Yeah.
feeling of
Mm,
what needed to be in the world. I didn't have a name. I didn't have, like, I had a general idea, but not really a fully formed concept. I had, okay, there needs to be this thing that you keep for as long as you need it, and then you give it to somebody else as you're moving through your grief. And
mm.
that's what I started with. And it was like
So the
all
concept, you had the
consuming.
concept. Yeah.
Yeah. And so the now a little bit more polished form of Sharing Solace. Our true mission is to help grievers grieve and lovers love those that are grieving. Um, and so what we do is we have a tangible gift. So we have a necklace and a keychain. And the idea is that you keep it near your heart as long as it brings you comfort and solace as you move along your own grief journey. And at some point, I hope you realize that keepsake doesn't bring you the same comfort that it once did. And at that
Mm,
point, you're actually intended to pay it forward to somebody else that you know or that you don't know that's grieving their own unique loss.
mm,
With the idea that each of these pieces has a unique identifier on them that allows you to register it on our website and actually follow it as it moves from person to person.
ah, it's just so beautiful. I think it's just so beautiful. I love that. Now, in that journey, then and this is something that I even asked you when we were talking. I'm like, do they get so attached? Because maybe you're ready, but I'm like, do you maybe not want to get give that part of the keepsake away? Like, and by the way, I'll put the website on the show notes, everyone, so you can get these because I believe these would be beautiful ways of being able to share with somebody that maybe's gone through a grief. You don't necessarily have to buy some flowers. You can buy something like this, or you also have all these other um, things on your website, correct? Not just this particular. It kinds of developed to different things, right? You
Yeah,
have
a little bit.
grieving, yeah. You have a journal, correct? You have a grief journal or
Uh-huh.
gratitude journal. Gratitude journal.
A gratitude journal. Yep.
Yes, love that. Yeah,
Um,
that I think
yeah,
is
I'm.
so important. Yeah. Okay. So yeah, so I was asking you, I'm like, yeah, do people just keep it? Do they actually give it away? They're little. So it's
Yes and no.
hard. Yeah. I would probably like take
um,
it off and put it like in my jewelry box. I'm like, okay,
yeah.
I'm ready, but I put it in my jewelry box for now
Mhm,
so that I can wear it if I need it again.
mhm.
Um,
Well, and part of that is why it's actually two pieces, and so you're
mhm.
intended to keep one piece because you never truly get over grief. Let's be
Yes,
honest.
yes, yes,
Um,
you're right.
you know, and so it kind of symbolizes you're still a whole person. You just are
Mhm.
missing a little bit, and then you
Mm,
pay forward the middle piece to someone else in a new token, in a new locket that allows them to register it on the website and help them through their own grief process.
that's so
Because I felt
beautiful.
like at some point in my life, I, I needed to release the debilitating grief.
Mhm.
I would always grieve, but I needed to let go of that super heavy, mad at the world grief.
Yes.
And so that's kind of what I hope that this symbolizes.
Yeah, and this is your, as we said, you birthed this idea into being, and now
Mhm.
paying it forward to others by sharing this. And then tell us about what happened then last summer or so. Um, that then was a journey of the last year.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. So last summer, some guy reached out to me. That sounds creepy, doesn't it? No.
Uh,
He was a professor at Georgetown. Um, and so I wrote a book. How crazy is that?
I know. I'm like, in a year. I want to hear when you said that. I'm like, oh my gosh! And just in a year, that's amazing. So he reached out and so he walked you through to how to be able to do this. Yes,
Pretty
and
much.
you
Yeah.
wrote this book. Yeah,
I wrote this book.
and the
Um,
launch date of the book
was, of course,
was
Madelyn's birthday, May 19th, 2020. So her birthday present this year was a book in the
so
Library of
her 10 year,
Congress.
her 10
Yep.
years, her 10 year, and then now this book. Tell us a little bit the name of the book, and then a little bit of the premise of it.
Oh, yeah. I'm kind of in love with the title. It's called Confessions of a Griever, Turning a
Mm.
Hot Mess into an Oat Message, Laughable
Eh,
Lessons for When Life Just Sucks.
oh, love that. Love that. Say it
And
one
it
more.
is,
Read it one more time. Say it one more time.
yeah,
Confessions of a Griever,
uh,
turning a
Confessions
hot
of a
mess. Yeah.
Griever.
Yes.
Yeah. Confessions of a Griever, Turning a Hot Mess into an Oat Message, Laughable Lessons for When Life Just Sucks.
Mm-hmm. Awesome.
Because sometimes
Awesome.
it just does.
It does. And it's
And
okay.
it
And it's
is,
okay. And
yeah,
and it's okay to have those, as you said, laughable messages, laughable moments to within
hmm
those moments of when it's sucking. And then, and then I liked what you told me of what it is. It's kind of like the choose your own narrative type of book. Is that correct? A little
exactly.
bit?
Yes.
Yeah.
So it's a little bit my story, of course, because I think that my hope is that by sharing my story, I can encourage others to share their story of grief as well. So it's a
Mm,
little bit my story. It's a little bit self help, so there's tips and tricks in there, but it's a choose your own grief guide. So at the
mm,
end of every chapter, you get options of where you want to go next. So you're
mhm.
not supposed to read the book cover to cover. You're
In order.
supposed to flip around.
And
Yeah.
that is because there's no real guideline or
Because
even
there's,
map line.
yeah,
There's no guideline to grief either. It doesn't come in any
right.
particular order. I love that
Exactly. Grief
vision.
is not linear. So why should a
No,
book
it's not.
about grief be
Why would
linear?
it be? I love that. I love that. That I'm going to say you're a genius, but at the same time, I want to say that let me just say the fact that you were able to hold on to that inspiration, because I feel like inspiration's there, and you just those that grasp it and are able to, you know, put it on, to the world, just like, sharing solace came to you like that lightning bolt, and however we want to feel and whoever we want to feel was part of that journey of you having that lightning bolt moment of knowing that this is how you were going to move on with your grief. And then this next chapter, literal chapter with now the book of your journey of grief, have all just been these beautiful ways of your process of healing and mourning, and that now you're able to, to give others those pieces of comfort and solace, like you say, sharing solace in this. So that's just beautiful. A lot of beautiful things that have come from something so hard. So thank you
Oh, well,
for
thank you.
moving that recliner bed out of the living room, and then allowing all these other things to come to the world too in that process. So, Crystal, it's been an honor to have you on, and thank you. And I'm going to be putting those things on the show notes. I want to buy your book. I want to choose my own grief story. And I was actually thinking this week, I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm about to interview Crystal, and I haven't bought her book yet. I guess I should have read her book before I have her on. But I'll just read along with the listeners then. I'll be reading along with everybody else. So,
There you go.
thank you once again.
Thank you.
Thank you again so much for choosing to listen today. I hope that you can take away a few nuggets from today's episode that can bring you comfort in your times of grief? If so, it would mean so much to me if you would rate and comment on this episode. And if you feel inspired in some way to share it with someone who may need to hear this, please do so. Also, if you or someone you know has a story of grief and gratitude that should be shared so that others can be inspired as well, please reach out to me. And thanks once again for tuning in to Grief, Gratitude, and the Gray in Between podcast. Have a beautiful day.